Hello and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined by Nathan, and we have two games to talk about today. Unfortunately, we do have to reflect on Borough's first home defeat this season. Of course, who else was it ever going to be against? Coventry City rocked up at the Riverside on Tuesday, and I was going to say did a job on Middlesbrough, but I think that would be a little bit unfair on the performance, which we'll obviously get into. And then, of course, we have Kim Hellberg's first Borough game in charge, first win in charge of Middlesbrough to discuss, of course, yesterday against Derby County. We are recording this on Sunday afternoon, so if Nathan randomly starts screaming, it's probably because Rob Edwards' Wolves have conceded to Aston Villa. So, with that being said, Nathan, let's just get straight into the Coventry game because I think I saw the phrase "it's a free hit" kind of murmuring around social media, and I almost hate. It was the same when Burnley rocked up at the Riverside a few years ago and were kind of just flying so high under Vincent Company that no one could get near them. But when you're playing a championship team, you've always got to kind of, and especially at home, you've always got to feel like there's a chance. And in all fairness, Middlesbrough aren't sitting bottom of the league. We are second in the table, or we might have been third going into that game, I think. Potentially level on points with Stoke. But regardless, it was always going to be a game where Coventry were absolutely going to do, as they have done all season, impose themselves on the game, probably score a couple of goals. But it was up to Borough to try and match that. And I think for large parts of that game, which we'll get into, they actually really did manage to do that.
Yeah, we certainly did. Yeah. I don't really know what I was expecting in regards of how the game would go, whether we'd have large amounts of possession, whether Coventry would and have a lot of territory in our half of the pitch, or whether it would go the way that it did, which was they would sort of allow Borough to control the possession of the football, but they'd try and control the game out of possession, really, and sort of stick in their shape. And when they did have the chances to, they would counter very quickly, very sharply, progress the ball as quick as possible up the pitch, hit Sims, who was fantastic on the night, wasn't he? A real threat in behind, a real imposing runner against our back three, as it was with the formation that we set up with Target and Bergzorg dropping out the team, Silvera coming in to play wing back, Brown dropping in to be a centre half, and Riley McGree was back in the team as well for us. But yeah, we controlled the first 10 minutes or so with the ball, but yeah, when Coventry got going forwards with their players running very quickly, very direct. They looked like they were a threat every time that they entered our half, didn't they? And yeah, the first real opening of the game that they play the ball into Sims, which look, it comes from the edge of their own box. Borough sort of lose possession. Coventry break top, skips past the challenge, then he gets past Morris, which I think you just have to be a little bit more nasty here. You have to haul him
Yeah.
down. Yeah, he gets away from Morris again. Thomas Asante sprints past Morris as well. They're getting bodies forward. They play the ball out wide to Sims, and literally on his one and only touch of the ball here, he does what he. It's literally the only thing he can do. He picks out the only part of the goal which he can find, and he dinks the ball with his right foot in the top corner over Solbrin, and it's an absolutely ridiculous finish. You can't take anything away from him. It's simply top draw.
Yeah, I think probably the story of the game, and obviously we'll get into it. Ultimately, Coventry have won this game through a couple of different avenues, but it showed the difference between Borough at the moment and Coventry at the moment, and that was even though they've got Hadji right out, who would usually be the man that starts number nine, they bring Ellis Sims in, who hasn't actually played an awful lot this season in terms of minutes, and you've still not got, too much of a drop off in quality. And as you say, it's a completely ridiculous finish, so credit to him on that. I actually thought, I know you did briefly mention it, but his overall play in terms of just being a vocal point, linking with Sakamoto, with Thomas Asante before he come off, Torp, it was a really, really good number nine performance. But yeah, you've got to look at that goal and think you're being sprung on. Aidan Morris has literally just got to take one out of the Adam Clayton handbook and just take a yellow card, really, just drag him down. I think it was interesting after the game that AD spoke about the fact that perhaps he was really pleased with the performance, but perhaps some of the really good things that Middlesbrough have been about this season in terms of being horrible to play against, being a little bit streetwise, all the things that we complained about last season that Borough weren't, but have been this season, taking little niggly yellow cards and just being a bit sensible about things we did lack because there was a few times where we were, and Coventry are great at it. It's, they're exploiting our weaknesses because we've probably got away with it against lesser teams this season. But I do think quite a few times because we had so much of the ball and so much territory again, like against Oxford, they counter-attacked us, but were probably counter-attacking with two attackers. The difference with Coventry was we had that much territory and that much of the ball, especially in those first 20 minutes. When they were countering, it felt like the red arrows, really, or the sky blue arrows. I don't know if you want to call it that. But there was like three, four bodies getting forward. And yeah, as I touched on, they were really good. And especially what I thought they did incredibly well. And when you've got a presence like Ellis Sims in the box, if they have an opportunity to deliver, they absolutely do. And to be honest, 9 times out of 10, it was really good quality deliveries. And that's obviously what the second goal comes from as well.
Yeah, definitely. That one comes from a corner and it gets cleared away. And the thing is with this one is a Borough player, I can't remember who it is, but is charging out to go and sort of impact Matt Grimes. And
I think it's Conway that wins the initial header and then tries to get out. I'm not 100% sure.
yeah, but sort of the point is it's that the Borough player is expecting Matt Grimes to take a touch, kill it dead, and then sort of maneuver it to whip across into the box. And the ball breaks nicely for him to come onto it straight away, deliver an absolutely wicked cross into the box on the volley. And yeah, Kitchen is probably what 6 to 8 yards out and just gets his head there before any Borough player can and diverts it into the back of the net. You 2-0 down all of a sudden. And yeah, Coventry have had two chances, scored their two goals, and it gets them into a really good position in the game where they can sort of just sit there like they were anyway, which was, yeah, sit in and counter-attack Borough at will, which they were very, very good at on the night.
Yeah, they absolutely were. But in fairness, a bit of a kind of developing theme over the last few games. Borough get themselves back into the game from a set piece. And in fairness, Morgan Whittaker, obviously, he's been spoken about an awful lot this season, and I'm sure we'll talk even more about him when we discuss the Derby game. But he's kind of found himself in a bit of a knack of popping up with a goal at the moment, and he seems to have found the Finnazaz gene, where his performances still leave a lot to be desired at times, or certain decisions that he makes. But over the last few games, and really since he opened his Borough account against Ipswich, he does have a tendency to pop up with a goal. And it's a set piece. I think Hackney delivers from a short corner. Alfie Jones makes first contact, and it's a tidy finish. Full volley, kind of slices against the ball. If I'm completely honest, from our view in the West, I thought he'd sliced it past the post. It took me an age to actually get up and celebrate the goal. But yeah, it gives Borough that kind of real belief because although there was a healthy crowd there, I did feel that when Coventry got their second, it was like everyone slumped back into the chair. And understandably, at 2-0 down, it kind of felt like we've bigged this up and they've just completely sucker punched us twice. And it feels like, right, a little bit flat. And that just give us enough, especially I think going into half time to just think, okay, we're not playing against, Real Madrid's best ever combined 11 here. It is Coventry, and they do have certain deficiencies. And actually, you go in at the break, 2-1 down, and I'm not going to lie, we come out in the second half and really, really produced, arguably for me, in terms of performance, one of the best performances we've put up this season. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and you kind of look at the scoreline at the end of the game, and you've conceded 4 goals at home, and to say it was a really good performance, but I thought second half, obviously, we get ourselves level again from another corner. Hayden Hackney with a good delivery, and Bobby Thomas just gets it completely wrong. But even up until that point, I felt like we were constantly knocking on the door.
Yeah, to a point we were. Yeah, we had lots of territory, lots of the ball in Coventry's final third. Obviously, it gives us a helping hand that Bobby Thomas gets it all wrong and puts it in the back of his own net. Whittaker had an effort that forced a really good save from Rushworth. But yeah, the we didn't like really threaten too much in terms of opportunities on Rushworth's goal, but the big chance, which we know everyone was going to talk about, was Hackney playing that ball over the top to Britton. It's a fantastic pass from Hackney, by the way, and a great ball in from Britton on his first touch to deliver it across the face. And the top and bottom of it is Conway has to score, and he blazes it over the top of the crossbar. And after the half an hour or so of us being really, really good at the start of that second half, the tide literally swung
It
on
was a
that.
complete momentum shift, wasn't it? It was almost as if Conway puts that in, and I know there's still, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes left, but you do feel if Borough then take the lead, that they probably go on to win the game. And I've seen a few people saying, oh, well, Coventry was still just as good as attacking, but you potentially kind of get another defender on and, sit a little bit deeper and try and defend your box. I think ultimately Coventry may well get themselves back into the game, even if we do take the lead. In hindsight, purely through what we've both touched on, their deliveries into the box were deadly. They introduced Radoni into the game, who I felt made a really big difference. But of course, he's one of the best players in the division. And we just missed that real kind of aerial threat in the box. And you're kind of hoping if Dale Fry is going to be out for any sustained period of time, that the introduction of Adilson Malanda is really going to make up for the lack of height in our back line. Because even yesterday it was makeshift, but Coventry, if you're playing against an Ellis Sims or a Kiefer Moore or some real kind of strong in the air physical profile, at the moment we just don't have the height to compete with it really.
Nah, we don't. Obviously, you look at those goals that Coventry scored on the night, two from set plays, although like they do break out and it's sort of second phases of set plays. But yeah, it lands fortunately that their third for them. Obviously, it lands at Thomas's feet and he gets his shot away. Bryn makes a save and it's parried straight back into the middle of the 6 yard box and
I
Kitchen
think
just gets it in.
Silvera's touch doesn't really help here as well. And
No, it doesn't.
I actually thought Silvera was okay on the night, but I think it's fair to say, and given what we saw yesterday as well in terms of the team selection, that the back five, Sammy Silvera as a wing back experiment, I'd be very shocked if we see that again at all under Kim Hellberg.
Well, it's sort of difficult. Obviously, we went to a four yesterday, but yes, he definitely can't play in a four. That's a given. But in a five, it's
He
again,
does give you an outlet. In fairness, I'm not kind of completely slating him because I thought he was all right. I just think defensively, he just is not
yeah,
reliable
he's not
enough.
a defender, is he? And
Yeah,
that's the top and bottom of it. But yeah, the two goals at the end, the sucker punches come from Coventry putting balls to the back post, really. The first one, as we say, with Thomas, it lands at his feet and it sort of lands fortunately for him to get his shot off with the touch back off Silvera. But that one to the back post and then standing one up for Sims, which we have targeting Silvera. And Alan Brown stood at the back post up against Sims, Radoni, who's a big sausage and all. And yeah, Kitchen and Thomas obviously really, really dominant in terms of their aerial threat. So yeah, I'm going to be honest though, and I think it sort of echoed throughout the fan base that despite the result, there was plenty of positives to take in regard of controlling the ball as much as we did, especially given we've seen from Carrick to Edwards, which was more pragmatic, more giving up possession in games under Edwards, where we did have the ball, we definitely struggled to sort of break teams down and break through. Granted, we scored two goals and one of them's an own goal here, but we had a lot of the ball. We had a couple of opportunities. We worked one really, really well, which your centre forward has to score. It's plain and simple, really. And yeah, we get done on the break a couple of times by the best team in the league, the most clinical team in the league, and that is simply the difference. That is why they're top of the league. That is why they've scored 50 goals in 18 games, because they take their chances. They create lots of chances and they take chances more often than not.
Yeah, yeah, they absolutely do. And I just want to touch on a few comments from 85 Ash at full time. It honestly made me quite upset because he kind of said that he felt like he'd let everyone down with the result. And I think, as we've touched on, Middlesbrough more than matched Coventry for a significant proportion of that game. And I actually saw you kind of, as a supporter of whoever you support, you always, whether you are as level-headed or as kind of delusional of a football supporter, you always do. You can't help looking at it through your team's lens. And sometimes you come away and then you think, actually, the atmosphere, being in the stadium, being a fan of the team that are putting the pressure on, perhaps really we didn't put that much pressure on. And it wasn't as kind of Borough putting Coventry on the back foot as much as perhaps you initially thought during the game. But I did also see a lot of Coventry fans after the game say Borough are one of the better teams that we've played this season, if not the best. They really did give us a proper game. And yeah, they've come out on top. But actually, I was really, really pleased. And going back to the point about Adie's comments about letting people down, couldn't have been further from the truth. Because in all honesty, we get a huge win against Birmingham on a day where that really could have turned sour quite quickly. We then go to Oxford. You see just on Friday night that they've then beaten Ipswich. They've taken points off Coventry at that stadium at home. And it's not an easy ground to go and play at. And look, I know they'll probably still be there or thereabouts in terms of fighting to stay in the league, but it was no disgrace picking up a point. And as we touched on last week, there was a lot of refereeing decisions that went it against us that probably determined that game as well. And then in terms of his final game in charge, you've gone toe to toe with the league leaders who are scoring a gazillion goals every game, it seems like. And I just thought he's handled himself with so much class, so many words, because his press conferences ended up being about 50 minutes apiece for the ones that he did do, which, by the way, are just one of those people that you would never ever get sick of listening to. But I know we touched on it last week and said, well, realistically, we don't see what he does in terms of on the pitch. So how can kind of people make statements like he's the best number two in the league or best assistant coach in the league? And we probably aren't ever going to really see that. But just in terms of a good human and someone that you want at your football club who, let's be honest, could have potentially jumped ship with Rob Edwards. I don't know. It's never kind of been confirmed if he was offered the opportunity, but genuinely cares about the football club after not being here for that long. And his words aren't empty. They are absolutely authentic and 100% truly spoken, and what a good speaker he is. So 85 Ash, I just want to say there's no chance you're listening to this podcast, but if you are, you absolutely have not let any Middlesbrough fan down at all. Moving on, Nathan, and obviously we'll speak about Derby, but I just want to get your take. Of course, Kim Hellberg, we did our podcast on Sunday and then it was uploaded kind of 20 minutes after he was actually announced on the Monday. We've now heard him speak for the first time. Of course, it's always slightly different when they speak to in-house media compared to when you've got a room full of journalists kind of asking you questions and trying to make things difficult for you. How did you think he dealt with that? Was there any kind of quotes or anything that really kind of pricked your interest? Because there was a couple of things which I'd like to touch on. But yeah, how did you think he did? And, what did you make of his kind of opening press conference as Borough head coach?
Yeah, I thought he'd done pretty well. It's always sort of strange as well with it being a Borough manager, seeing how they deal with the press and something that hasn't really. come up in the past, obviously, because considering we usually hire British managers, is he's speaking the second language.
Yeah.
So in some moments, obviously, he's trying to find the correct word. But yeah, I thought he did really well. And look, I think that for the most part, what he says about us being in the Premier League or aiming for the Premier League this season or next, that's fine. Like we're under no illusion that we're in a really good position. It's second place in the league, but if anyone before the season had said, right, automatic promotion to the game, they'd have probably been lying, wouldn't they? Really, if you looked at the teams in the division, your Ipswiches and Southamptons that have an embarrassment of riches in terms of parachute payments and squad to pick from in comparison to most of the rest of the division. You wouldn't have thought that Borough would have been in this position going into December. But yeah, I think that he'll certainly be aiming for the playoffs, and I thought that he spoke well in regard to just understanding that we don't need to change all too much. There's a couple of tweaks that we need to make us more efficient in the final third, make us better in the final third at creating chances. And look, if we create more chances, obviously that gives us more chance to score goals. He can't do that himself in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net, but finding methods that can help us create more chances is his job. And if we can do that, then it gives us the best chance to succeed. And yeah, obviously, I think that the interesting points would be is referencing to Bielsa and De Zerbi, which is very much interesting attacking football. I think it's fair to say, and I think that's
High
what you're
risk, high
alluding to.
reward.
Yeah, I think that's what you're alluding to in terms of it being interesting. But yeah, I didn't necessarily see the De Zerbi Bielsa style yesterday too much in terms of the system. There was a little bit of that with the 4-2-2, but yeah, I thought that he spoke really well in his first press conference.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that you make about obviously we're so used to hearing from British managers that being the age that he is and speaking in a language that's not his native language or first language, like remarkably impressive anyway. But even though at times you do sense that he's almost like looking for the right words, I thought he spoke so eloquently and almost always does actually, even if it takes him a few moments, find the right words and explains himself really, really clearly. And obviously you've got the Bielsa and the De Zerbi points, but I think perhaps what was most impressive and what put my mind at ease a lot was just as you touched on his kind of constant reiteration of the fact that actually, yes, I view my football team in a certain way, and in a year's time, this Middlesbrough team might look completely different to the one that finishes this season. But we're in this position now, and it would almost be crazy for me to just come in and tear everything up and start again. And look, I think to be honest, in terms of the team he picked yesterday and the change of shape, it was probably more change than we were anticipating. And there was signs of change, which we'll obviously get into. But yeah, it put my mind at ease because you see with so many managers these days, look at Amorim, Postecoglou to a certain extent, they go in and are basically that ego driven and have that much kind of, I guess you could call it self belief in their own style, that they just neglect any of the positives from a previous head coach and just basically go big cross through anything that the previous manager has done. We're going to do it this way, and even if we get beat 5 times in a row, it'll eventually work out. And ultimately, that's been their downfall. And yeah, I think that was really impressive. What was also impressive, and it was interesting because on the broadcast of the press conference, it just cuts off randomly, but it's obviously as the written media starts, and a few people are like, "What's gone on there?" Fair enough, as written journalists, I'm sure Dom and Craig and Scott and whoever else want their little slice of the cake. So, they got that. But reading some of the quotes in the Echo and the Gazette, when asked about the forward line, I thought it was really interesting that he spoke about it kind of tied in when he was referring to little tweaks that he wants to make about creating chances and watching lots of footage of Middlesbrough's forwards, not just in Borough colours, but for their previous clubs as well, and understanding the actual attributes and the strengths of his forward line, and kind of referenced that, I think, not directly, but was asked the question regarding Tommy Conway and said, crossing the ball high into the box might not necessarily be a certain forward's strength. Now, we've spoken about this countless times, and there's a whole different can of worms to open up about Tommy Conway that I'm not going to do. But it was really good that he was so open and honest and spoke so clearly that kind of put it in simple terms that anyone would understand. We all know that Tommy Conway is not Ellis Sims, and we've got other strikers. He didn't kind of directly say, yeah, don't put the ball in high at Tommy Conway, but it was quite clear that those tweaks that he was referring to are very much his top priority in terms of an attacking sense. There's plenty of good stuff at the back and even in midfield, but it's adding those tweaks up front, which we all recognise was the issue as well, really, or has been this season.
Yeah, definitely. That is the main point, isn't it? That we need to create more chances. We ideally need to score more goals, or at least have the ability to score more goals in games. And yeah, find more avenues from open play to create chances. We've certainly improved in the set piece aspect this season, which obviously we'll touch on when we get to Derby. But yeah, we need to find more avenues in open play, creating opportunities. So he's just speaking what everyone already knows, and that is really important. Just hitting the nail on the head, right? We're very clear with what the aim is. So let's see it. Let's see if he can bring us that success, creating more chances. But his first game in charge, Chris, we'll move on to that now, which is very interesting, as you say, about the team selection. 4-2-2, which is something interesting, something that we haven't seen so far, especially with two up front. And team selection, obviously interesting, touching on the quotes from the week in which he said about Borough's striking options being very good, and then playing Delano Bergzorg in the nine, which was very interesting. But the main ones were Hansen in the team after his cameo against Coventry, which I thought he was relatively bright, relatively impressive. And obviously, the key standout was the return to the starting 11 of Alex Bangura for the first time in what feels like forever. I
Yeah,
honestly can't remember his last appearance. I think it would have
no.
been about 2 seasons ago now. Yeah, you didn't really know what to expect. Obviously, we know Bangura's got an interesting skill set. You're hoping that he can get through the game as well as he possibly can, and obviously offer us something. And yeah, credit to him. Really, really pleased for him. We'll get onto that towards the back end when we've discussed the game. But a very interesting starting 11. Obviously, we're down to the bare bones in terms of defenders, hence Bangura's appearance in the team. Target at centre half with Alfie Jones. Britain, the ever present, and it's a less than ideal start. Borough's own goal kick, take it long, headed away by Sanderson, flicked on by Salverson. Ajimang's in behind. He's quick, he's strong, direct, gets his shot off, buries it at the near corner. Great finish for him, in all fairness, and gives Derby a really good start. And you think, well, that's great. The T4 looked fantastic before the game. It's absolutely torrential rain. We've gone 1-0 down, new manager, new system, down to the bare bones Valras in terms of a squad. And now we're chasing the game against John Eustace, who is literally just an abomination of a manager when you play up against his sides. And yeah, a less than ideal start. And we just couldn't get a foothold in the game, could we, for the first 20, 25 minutes? There was a point at about minute 25 where I just turned to my dad and I said, are these just going to stop having corner kicks? Because it was like corner into the box, cleared for another corner, corner into the box, cleared for another corner, and we just couldn't get out. And it just felt like it was going to be one of those afternoons.
Yeah, it was, as you say, bearing in mind it was a brave team selection, and obviously we had the Tifo, and then just the worst possible start. And what followed was plenty of derby corners, really, as you put it. And in all honesty, I spent the first kind of 40 minutes of the first half thinking, right, it's his first game in charge. He's picked a team. He's been brave. But my God, I really hope it improves because I thought we were dreadful in the first half. I really did. And it seemed to me in the first half, yesterday especially, that with a 4-2-2, you are playing a very narrow system, and there is so much responsibility for the fullbacks to get high and wide and provide any width. And what was so good in the second half, or what we did better, I should say, is we were sucking Derby in by playing narrow and then by making the game narrow, and to be fair, our fullbacks getting a little bit higher, we're able to then create crossing opportunities. In the first half, ironically, the best chance of the game for Borough in the first half, where it's an unbelievable strike on his weak foot from Callum Britton, but it literally comes from both fullbacks. On one side, Bangura, Sanjay Hansen is quite narrow, probably in a crossing shooting position, and Bangura just thinks, right, okay, I'm getting another byline, I'm giving him an option. He cuts it back. Bangura, a really good delivery, and there was two times in the first half, sorry, where he puts probably as good of a delivery from a fullback that I've seen since He Who Shall Not Be Named. And that's quite high praise in terms of a fullback, especially a left back delivering balls into the box. But yeah, this one, he cuts it back. Britain makes a really, really good run, and it's unbelievable strike. You're kind of thinking it's a goal, but I mean the technology's there, and it doesn't actually cross the line. In fairness, but yeah, I felt it was frustrating. Other than those couple of opportunities where fullbacks really held the width and helped us in that manner, it was so frustrating to watch because they were playing basically a 5-3-2. Ben Brereton Diaz was almost playing as a centre midfielder, which was an odd one to watch, but he actually did well, kind of trying to get them up the pitch in the first half. They just didn't even try to get up the pitch in the second half, which was an interesting tactic from Eustace. But yeah, it was so narrow, and that 4-2-2, as you say, it felt like everything was so congested that they were just basically happy to allow that to happen. And I don't know if you've seen the quotes. I don't know if they're out, but Anthony Vickers, who used to, or Untypical Borough, as most Middlesbrough fans will know him as on social media, who used to work for the Gazette, now works for the club, said that unlike any British managers, Hellberg, and sometimes people say the same about Arnie Slot. I mean, I don't know how much he wants to be talking about his tactics at the moment, given Liverpool's form. But foreign managers, Dutch, Scandinavian, are always a lot more open in terms of tactically what might have changed or what they were trying to do in the game. And Hellberg has since said that at half time he spoke to his players about A, saying that he thinks we've got enough quality to turn this game round, but B, he wanted us to actually try and, as I say, make the game narrow and then rely on fullbacks to stay wide, create width, and deliver balls into the box. But also a key part of that was trying to basically make shorter passes and more kind of intricate passes. And I think there was a couple of times, which we'll talk about, where in and around the box, Hackney and Conway combine, and Hackney has a shot that just goes over the bar. The passing was shorter, and it almost felt like Borough were just suffocating Derby at times. There was times really where, if you watch highlights, the only Borough player not in picture was actually Solbrin, because Alfie Jones and Matt Targett were kind of, they weren't, I'm not exaggerating here, but it felt like they were almost on the 18-yard line. It was that kind of sucked in, and that really, really, really helped. And obviously, we'll talk about the second half performance and Borough's pressure and how bad Derby's attempt at doing whatever they were trying to do in the second half was. But in terms of those short, sharp passes and progressing the ball quickly and efficiently, I thought personally the game massively changed when Riley McGree was introduced in an unfamiliar role, Nathan.
Yeah, it was a bit strange, wasn't it? But He done really well. Yeah, he won a couple of headers. I've noticed that he's got a little bit of nastiness in him, getting his foot in and getting us up the pitch as well, which is really, really important, getting us on the front foot. But a lot has to be said about the state of Derby. I thought they were pathetic in the second half. They really, really were. The fact that in the first half they looked dominant, they had a lot of good opportunities, albeit from set plays, obviously to get the early goal. And look, they didn't threaten Solbring's goal all too much with him having to make saves, but they certainly looked a threat. And in the second half, no shots, obviously no shots on target, literally nothing from them. Borough had 75% possession of the ball. A lot of that in Derby's half of the pitch. Yeah, they were completely pathetic and abject. And having watched the EFL highlight show on ITV and seeing Eustace his interview after the game saying that they did well in the second half and it was just for the lack of legs. I don't know what I'd be thinking if I was a Derby fan because they were absolutely shite, like really shite. But yeah, enough about them anyway. We just had to show a little bit of impetus, get forward, try and threaten, try and make opportunities. We had a couple of efforts. You noted Hackney's from outside the box, which was very early on in the second half. A couple of instances where we got crosses into the box and the ball just wouldn't land our way. Whittaker had an effort from a free kick, which has been noted as a shot on goal, a shot on target, which it wasn't. It was wide. We could see it from our position in the ground. Target was close from a free kick, but again wide. But yeah, the unorthodox way of Borough scoring goals in this instance is a set play up against Derby's big lumps, and rising highest is Matt Target. And do you want to know what? It is an absolutely cracking header. It is a really, really good header, climbing above his man and just directing it back into the top corner. It is a brilliant, brilliant goal. And if the momentum wasn't already in Borough's favour, trying to get ourselves back into the game, when that goal goes in, it only felt like there was going to be one winner in the game, and it was going to be Middlesbrough 100%. The goal goes in, and Borough just try to continue doing what they were doing before that. And yeah, on the front foot. Again, trying to create chances, making attacking changes. Obviously, Hansen had to go off at the same point as Alan Brown went down with an injury. Fingers crossed that was just a knock, or he's just gone down trying to force the change. But yeah, Bergzorg went to the left for a period. In the end, Sen, Strelec, Nipan, McGree all off the bench and into the team and
They were
all played the part.
Yeah, I was just going to say they were the right changes, but brave changes because even at 0-0, he makes, I think it's 54 minutes, Strelec and McGree come on, and then only, 10 minutes later or something, and it was before we'd got the equaliser, he introduces Nipan and Sen. And, of course, he had to go for it because we were 1-0 down, but still, in terms of a new shape and throwing that many attacking players on, perhaps in hindsight, when we are committing more bodies forward and having more attacking players or attack minded players on the pitch, if Derby try and counter attack us, then they may punish us for that. But ultimately, they didn't, and we took advantage of that. And what I was just going to joke about there is it's an unbelievable header from Matt Target and was the first corner in the second half where we just delivered it into the box. There was so many, it felt like we had quite a fair few corners, but so many times we went short and I was going, just please cross it in the box. Please cross it in the box. Hackney delivers the corner and Matt Target rises like a prime Sergio Ramos. But then we get the winner from playing a short corner. So really, I can't really make too much of a point on that. But yeah, as you say, it was, in hindsight, a lot of yesterday's second half performance was impressive, but also I think Derby allowed us to be impressive, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, they were really poor.
Yeah, and I think just touching on the goal now and the fact that obviously we've won the game off two set pieces. I know you wanted a special shout out for a member of Derby's backroom staff, given that we actually won the game from two set pieces.
Yeah, he was just a proper busybody, wasn't he? The Derby set piece coach. I don't know his name, not really interested either, enough to Google what he's called, but yeah, he was just a nuisance on the sideline all game. And it's not just him, in fairness. There's plenty of set piece coaches in the football industry currently that think they actually have an impact on what's going on the pitch from their position on the touchline. And yeah, it was just very nice to see Whitaker get that cross come shot into the bottom corner and yeah, into the back of the net, flying over to the Derby fans to give them a bit of stick. Back after being chewed all game by the travelling fans. He's a Derby lad himself as well, came through their academy, so that was nice. A little bit of old club syndrome for
Well, going in our favour for once, it's usually
yeah,
the other way around, isn't it?
it is, yeah. And the Derby set piece coach, it was good viewing to see him turn to the dugout
He just
with his
turned
hands
around
with
with
his
his
hand.
hands on his head.
What a muppet, honest to God. Yeah, nice to get a win. We really, really needed it after the last two results. A home defeat in the week. It's important to bounce back. We did that, and for the first time this season, we came from behind to win a game, which is really, really important, especially given the circumstances with our injury troubles once again that we've had for the last 27 seasons on the bounce. But 3 points on a Saturday, looking at the results round the table, I know it's not the time of the season really to be looking at other results, but when you look and see Ipswich beat on the Friday night, Southampton beat in the last minute yesterday, Stoke beaten as well in the early kickoff. It was really, really important just for our own good, really, and build some confidence going into a week of Hellberg training and then another 3 game week beginning with Hull. But yeah, the T4, fantastic, and some shout outs for a couple of the players yesterday. Obviously, firstly, Bangura, given man of the match by the fans, and I don't think that you could really disagree with it. I thought he didn't really put a foot wrong
Yeah,
in the game.
I think in terms of just to touch on Bangura, and this is no slight on him at all, in terms of had that just been a footballer playing a game of 30 that he played in a season, you probably wouldn't highlight him. But to be out for that long, I think it was 22 months that he's been out. He hasn't even really played in any under 23 games. He has literally been the epitome of the saying thrown in at the deep end after Hellberg said that he just impressed him in training twice to perform the way he did, not put anything wrong. You could see in his performance that he almost kind of, as the minutes ticked on and he kind of got tackled or he had to go and win a header and use his body, his confidence in his own body grew throughout the game. And obviously, I think that, like, even the mental side of it, not just in terms of him putting a few nice crosses into the box and not doing anything wrong as such, I think just the actual strength mentally out after being out that long and having been out for so long and then starting against Bradford and going off after 10 minutes, that is probably not something that everyone will think about, but that resilience is, well, just iron strong, really. So a massive, massive congratulations and well done, Alex Bangura.
100%, 100%. And then, yeah, I mean, you could go around and give them all a little bit of praise, but Matt Target playing out of position steps up really, really well with the header, gets us back into the game, and then you can give you shout outs for McGree coming on and changing it. I think again, Hackney, I know he's been sort of relatively quiet, but in this week especially, stood up and played long periods in games where we have tried our best to create chances, score goals, and in the end he comes away yesterday with 2 assists in the game. Yeah,
Captain
look,
yesterday as well.
captain, yeah, and look, you saw the reaction at full time. Matt Target and Hackney both giving a roar to each other at full time, knowing that that was a massive result yesterday, coming back from behind again. Look, we've been very critical, I think, of Whitaker throughout his Borough career so far because of the expectation on his shoulders coming into a club and the fee paid for him. Look, it's not his fault that that fee was high and what have you, but he stepped up the last couple of weeks with goal contributions and his goal contributions at Oxford and again yesterday have earned you a good fair share of points. So That is really, really important. But yeah, the interesting one yesterday was looking at the Borough bench and seeing what defenders we had available. Interestingly, George McCormick not on the bench yesterday, so another one that's probably had an injury or an illness. A new name in the Borough squad yesterday, Archie Baptiste, who signed for the club and for the under 23s in the summer from Tottenham. And he came on yesterday for the last couple of minutes to see us out in stoppage time and won an absolutely monstrous header, didn't he?
I think he
Yeah.
was the only Borough centre half to win a header against Adjaman all day.
Yeah. He was really emotional at full time as well. There was obviously those scenes at the end of the game with Bangura going over and giving his fist bumps. Baptiste did it, Whitaker did it, and obviously Hellberg gave his one, and he'll learn from that. But he
Yeah,
also sang
I
the
did.
chant as well.
I must admit, I did kind of. I thought, oh no, he hasn't quite grasped what he had to do here, and he's gone for one. But then he made up with it by like joining in the chance, so he kind of got off with that one. I did find that quite funny, but yeah, the header from Baptiste, and sorry because I've interrupted you here. I'd actually left the ground by this point and was trying to just get back to the car as quick as possible and not get soaked. But you, as the loyal passion-driven fan that you were, you did mention Baptiste was quite emotional. I think AD kind of well, not comforted him, but almost celebrated with him.
Yeah, the as they were walking down the tunnel at full time after being serenaded by the South Stand, Adi was sort of having a conversation with him with his arm round him, and Baptiste had his hand over his face almost. Well, I think he probably was in tears, making his professional debut. Credit to him, fair play. Obviously, you don't necessarily know the journey that these people have been on to make that step up in professional football, and he's made his professional debut for a championship club. He's evidently suffered a setback in terms of having to move on from Tottenham. Look, he's evidently rebuilt himself into a good centre half at under 21s level for Borough to pick him up, and yeah, well done to him for that. But yeah, the big one is 3 points after a difficult week, and I think I said on my Twitter at full time that battered, bruised, and depleted, but never ever down and out. This team, compared to last season, where a lot of questions were asked of them about the character of a couple of the players, and obviously, if you have a couple of players that have poor character, you could say that seeps into the rest of the group. But this group of players, I think that they never know when they're beaten, really. Yesterday, especially for the first time this season, coming from behind and winning a game, really, really good. Credit to them. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a really really great trait to have, and I think one that is endeared Middlesbrough supporters, and there's varying factors, but I do feel a sense that the club in general just seems tight in it this season. There seems to be a real kind of relationship developing, and that has already been kind of formed between the supporters and the staff and the players. And you can tell, I think as a football fan, what you want is just 11 players and however many subs and your manager to just basically work their arse off. And even if they do get beat, you go, okay, fair enough. But that's like one of the strangest feelings, and I said the same to other people, was I come out the ground on Tuesday night and I felt, well, they literally give everything. It's a bad miss from Conway and the momentum changes, but they've gone toe to toe with a really good side. And then yesterday, obviously, they get their rewards for, continuing to bang on the door and eventually knocked it down. Next up, Nathan, a Friday night game. How, or I guess, where does a Friday night kickoff fall in your kind of enjoyment levels of a 3 o'clock or an early Saturday or those ridiculous Sunday kickoffs in the Championship? Friday nights are a little bit make and break because it can ruin a weekend, can't it? But it can also just be the best thing ever.
Yeah, I was going to say it is very much result dependent, isn't it? If you get beat, it's enough to just stamp out a weekend, and you think, is there any need for that? And if you win, it's like you can have a little skip into the town on a Friday night, have a couple of beers, go into Saturday again. bright and cheerful on a Saturday morning. You think, right, I can watch all the footy without too much stress because our team have done their job. But yeah, a difficult test on Friday night for Borough going to Hull. And to be fair, they are doing really well for what I think a lot of fans of the Championship would have expected from them heading into the season. Obviously, years ago, they spent very heavily and they're paying the price for that now. They can only sign free agents, and they've signed some really good free agents, in fairness to them, in McBurney, who was their top goal scorer up until yesterday. He's been out injured. He is back for our game on Friday night, typically, as is Liam Miller, who has had a serious injury in the last year or so, came back and has had another little setback, but apparently he's going to be back fit for Friday night as well, so that's a little bit of a dampener. But Hull as a team are very weird. You might think, well, why is that? Well, they've got the second best attack in the division. They've scored 30 goals, but they've also conceded 30 goals, which is the second worst in the division behind Sheffield Wednesday. And then if you look at the actual like underlying numbers, the XG and XGA, they've scored near enough six more goals than they're expected to, and they've conceded six less goals than they're expected to. They've got the worst expected goals against in the division, worse than Sheffield Wednesday. But yeah, they've got some good players littered throughout the team. Despite that, they've got Charlie Hughes, who is very well thought of. Coventry were bidding £10 million for him in the summer, and Hull said no. And he looks like he's going to be a player that can go for 15 odd million quid either in January or the back end of the season. You've got a couple of workhorses up front in Joseph and Gelhardt, who is currently their main man, really, in the absence of McBurney and Miller. Scored and set up 9 goals and assists in the last 9 appearances for Gelhardt. Scored the winner yesterday at Stoke, which is a top result for them as well. They came from behind to win that game.
Are you gonna? I was gonna say, are you gonna touch on the two elephants in the room here or not?
Yeah, I'm getting there, and it's just really, really gutting to see two players that you, loads of
I,
Borough
I,
fans
I
loved so
think,
much.
yeah, they are really kind of two figures that were real important pieces in two really good spells for the club in recent times, when obviously we haven't had loads of kind of great times or too much success in terms of actually getting promoted or out of the league. But you think of Crooks, you think of the cup run, you think of the late winners, and then Ryan Giles. We're not going to get into that Michael Carrick season because it'll just bring up too much trauma for Nathan. And him seeing him at a service station last season before he re-signed on loan. But yeah, I think in terms of Ryan Giles, you're seeing this season the Ryan Giles that you saw 3 years ago, however long it was now. He's got way more freedom to basically do what he does best. But also, as we well know, Ryan Giles can be exploited in certain circumstances. So there's that in it in terms of Borough's shape, and I guess an interesting one because will Hellberg stick with the 4-2-2? Does Britain get the better of Giles? I guess because they'll be kind of directly going back and forth at one another. I know Crooks come into the team yesterday. Seems to be in and out a little bit, Crooks, as he probably was more so in the Carrick era of Matt Crooks. I think everyone probably thinks of him more during the Chris Wilder era. But yeah, we all know his ability getting into the box, scoring goals, kind of going unnoticed, and being a good finisher, really. He's done it plenty of times for Borough, so yeah, he's still a real threat.
Definitely, he's got a knack of scoring goals. That's what's really good about Matt Crooks. They have a lot of goal threats throughout that team that are all chipping in really well. And obviously, we're away from home. It's a difficult test for us. But if you can get a result there, it'll be a really, really positive one. They've been pretty good at home this season, Hull. And if you can get a result there at the start of a 3 game week with Charlton and QPR to follow, that'd be really, really, really positive. They just come thick and fast. It's December, and yeah, Borough injured and depleted, and fingers crossed in the next week before the game on Friday night we can get a couple of bodies back. It sounds like Ayling and Morris will be okay, so that's positive on that front. But fingers crossed, Dale Fry and George Edmondson can just be wrapped in cotton wool and play some games eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you summarised it pretty well there. Borough heading into December, depleted and with a long list of injuries. I mean, what's new, really? It's just been the case for the last probably 5 seasons. But yeah, as you say, obviously Hull to come, a little bit of a reunion with Ryan Giles and the tree. Hopefully we come out on the right hand side of it and continue with a nice little winning run, I guess. It's the start of one. You've got to win one game to start a run, and hopefully we get that new manager bounce that everyone always cries out for. So yeah, as always, thank you ever so much for watching and listening to this week's episode. A huge thank you for all your continued support. And I'm going to say it again, we're trying to hit that 1,000 at some point. So if you want to give us an early Christmas present, please do subscribe to the channel if you're not already on YouTube. Audio listeners, as always, thank you to you as well. And Nathan, for your time on Sunday. We're going to wrap it up here. So hopefully we can get downstairs and watch Morgan Rogers score a last minute winner against that clown and his mate in the Wolves dugout. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast. We'll see you again next week.